Good morning. Pleasant good morning to members of the media and all of our viewers, and welcome to our Sunday morning press briefing here at the office of the opposition, the United National Congress. We maintain our position that it is our duty to bring to you important issues on a weekly basis and intermittently as needed as well. And this morning I am, of course, Jayanti Lakshmidiyal, opposition senator, and I'm very pleased this morning to be joined by someone who I consider to be one of our national heroes, someone who spent in what was the most vicious attack on our democracy in this country in recent times, and that we could recall. He is the former Minister of National Security, and he is also a former Member of Parliament for what was then the, before the gerrymandering, what was known as the seat, and that is local government reform and the issue of local government reform, following which I will speak on a couple of matters which has also been making headlines dealing with certain cases that are before the court at this point in time. Hand over to Mr. Tony.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Good morning to all our viewers, both here and abroad, and a special good morning to our media practitioners. I want to say on behalf of our party a special greeting to the Muslim community who this week celebrated Eid al-Adha. May you all live to have many more celebrations. Today I come before you to speak on a topic which I consider, to get to that, let me state categorically that and letters of our political leader, Mrs. Prasad for international observers, and I'm in full support because this election in many ways is historic. They declared that the decision to postpone the local government elections by the PNM for 1 year, which they did in November 2022, was illegal, null, void, and has no effect. And that the Parliament has no business choosing representatives for the people at the local government level. And that in a democracy, it is the right of the people to choose their representatives. So this election is non-fashion. Election observers are also my friends, because in the past the EDC has been shown to be with sin. That is, they are not shy about breaking the law. Remember, in the 2015 general election, they were found to be in breach of the law when they extended the poll caught in the slips by the Privy Council in respect of their illegality in attempting to postpone the local government elections by a year, and thereby robbing us of our right to vote at the appropriate time for our local government representatives. This deceitful PNM is still trying to pull the wool over our eyes. Fictitiously, they have tied it in with the unpopular property tax. Can you believe that? From this government? This government minister will call the election when it is due. This government which told the OWTU that they are going to move them from trade unionism into business activity. This government which once boasted to almost everyone who wanted to hear that they had the best education system in the world. But today, they are saying that that education system is now a wasteland of young people and for young people. Do you trust them? Do you trust them to effect local government reform in this country? Their words, as I have demonstrated to you earlier on, amount to nothing. Zilch, zero, nada. Let us look at why we must distrust this government on the issue of local government reform. Let us take a look at the history on the topic. Ralph Maraj, noted Sunday Express columnist, had this to say. This was Sunday, 25th June 2023 at page 15. He said, but all we have in Trinidad and Tobago is endless empty talk of reform. Did the Prime Minister, Dr. Pete Rowley, in 2016, his minister embarked grandly on national consultations for local government reform? What happened after all the talk and theatre? And after the 2016 national consultations, didn't we have local government elections in 2019 when they came promising a new to show you the deceit? Abject deceit of the PNM when it comes to local government reform. In the general election of 2015, the PNM manifesto set out very clearly that the PNM was bent on local government reform. The people believed them. They won the general election. They came back again. They said local government reform. The people believed them again. They won the local government election in 2016. 3 years later, mind you, May 2019, they introduced the bill for local government reform in Parliament, say for the following term. On July 1, 2022, and I want you all to bear that date in mind this morning, July 1, 2022, the JSC finished their work. The bill came back to the Parliament and was passed with a simple majority. Our party abstained because we were uncertain about the unpopular property tax. The elections were then scheduled for December 2022. In November 2022, they went up to the extension of Balize House at President's House and got Section 11A4. Only that section. They got only that section proclaimed by Her Excellency the President. 42 days approximately from today. My friends, because in the past law, when they extended the post, but having been caught in the slips by the Privy Council in respect of their illegality in attempting to postpone the local government elections by a year and thereby robbing us of our right to vote at the appropriate time for our local government representatives, this deceitful PNM is still trying to pull the wool over our eyes. Fictitiously, they have tied it in with the unpopular property tax. Can you believe that? From this government? This government which Prime Minister will call the election when it is due. This government which told the OWTU that they are going to move them from trade unionism into business activity. This government which once boasted to almost everyone who wanted to hear that they had the best education system in the world. But today, they are saying that that education system is now a wasteland of young people and for young people. Do you trust them? Do you trust them to effect local government reform in this country? Their words, as I have demonstrated to you earlier on, amount to nothing. Zilch, zero, nada. Let us look at why we must distrust this government on the issue of local government reform. Let us take a look at their history on the topic. Ralph Maraj, noted Sunday Express columnist, had this to say. This was Sunday, 25th June 2023 at page 15. He said, "But all we have in Trinidad and Tobago is endless empty talk of reform. Did the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, in 2016, embarked grandly on national consultations for local government reform? What happened after all the talk and theatre? And after the 2016 national consultations, didn't we have local government elections in 2019 when they came promising a new..." Show you the deceit, abject deceit of the PNM when it comes to local government reform. In the general election of 2015, the PNM manifesto set out very clearly that the PNM was bent on local government reform. The people believed them. They won the general election. They came back again. They said, local government reform. The people believed them again. They won the local government election in 2016. 3 years later, mind you, May 2019, they introduced the bill for local government reform in Parliament, say for the following term. On July 1, 2022, and I want you all to bear that date in mind this morning, July 1, 2022, the JSC finished their work. The bill came back to the Parliament and was passed with a simple majority. Our party abstained because we were uncertain about the unpopular property tax. The elections were then scheduled for December 2022. In November 2022, they went up to the extension of Balize House at President's House and got Section 11A4. Only that section. They got only that section proclaimed by Her Excellency the President. 42 days approximately from today. Friends, because in the past law, when they extended the post, but having been caught in the slips by the Privy Council in respect of their illegality in attempting to postpone the local government elections by a year and thereby robbing us of our right to vote at the Local Government Reform Act is already passed since 2022 and assented to by the President since July 1st, 2022. So it is a responsibility of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, if they are serious about local government reform, to do their task. Get off the golf course. Get off from sailing on your boat every weekend all over the Gulf of Paria. Wake up and do the work that you have been put in office to do. But as I said, even though this is so clear, you know they still manage to fool some people. Hear what the Express editorial of Wednesday, June 28, 2023, I pull out a piece. The ruling People's National Movement has been campaigning on local government reform, but it is very well aware that changes to the law do not rise to the level of meaningful reform due to the lack of support for its plan by the opposition United National Congress. Another version of the blame Kamla syndrome. The opposition United National Congress has nothing to do with the implementation of all the matters of local government reform. So they fool this editorialist of the Daily Express. They also fooled an editorialist of The Guardian, Tuesday, June 27, 2023. For Dr. Rowley, it says, the singular issue in the August 14 local government election is whether voters support or oppose his party's vision of local government reform. Mr. Editorial Writer of The Guardian and The Express, local government reform is already law. Tell the government, write an editorial and tell the government to implement the law and stop playing smart with foolishness. Implement the law, please. But in implementation, we see problems. They have 10 pillars. They speak of local government reform, 10 pillars. The first pillar is security and funding. I will come back to security just now, but let me deal with funding. To fund it, they have slipped in property tax. The unpopular property tax that no one wants in Trinidad and Tobago. And they said that, but before I get into it, they said there are four categories of this tax: residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural. The local government legislation local government reform legislation, this act, only allows the regional corporation to collect the property taxes from residential land and nothing more. And when you get that property tax, you know the government has this mantra that the local government bodies are going to get more funding because they're going to get property tax into their coffers. Nonsense. As my Spanish friends will tell you, mucho tonteria. So let us look at section 108. Section 108 of the Act number 11 of 2022. Here it says, this is what it says. Where estimates have been approved for use for corporation for a particular year, and the corporation is in receipt of sums collected from property taxes for use by the corporation, the sums shall be offset from releases due to the corporation for that year. So if in your releases you get $20 million and you collect $2 million in property tax, the Ministry of Finance by its releases is only allowed to give you $18 million. So you remain with the same $20 million that you have been accustomed getting as releases. So where is this extra funding that Dr. Rowley and his minions are talking about all over Trinidad and Tobago that you're going to get from property tax? You are going to get no more funds at the regional corporation. It remains the same. And then we go to the claim, the second pillar, executive authority. They say they're going to allow executive authority. Nonsense again. Total balderdash again. The only person who's going to have extra executive authority is the Minister of Finance. He is the one who will approve the budget of the regional corporation. He's going to approve their remuneration, and I want local government practitioners to take particular note of this, because this local government reform is going to put them in a worse off position, in the sense that your stipends, your remuneration is now governed and organized by the Salaries Review Commission. When by this act, Act number 11 of 2022, it is the Minister of Finance who is going to determine what your stipend is going to be, what your salary is going to be. And you all know how liberal, and I use the word liberal in inverted commas, that Minister of Finance is with our dollars in Trinidad and Tobago. But not only that, any loans or grants or technical assistance from any international donor has to be approved by the Minister of Finance. Your organizational chart has to be approved by the Minister of Finance. The officers to sign checks, they have to be authorized by the Minister of Finance. And they come in to tell you about executive authority, and they all over the place. We're going to make them like the Tobago House of Assembly. Tobago House of Assembly, my foot. The Tobago House of Assembly is clothed with constitutional authority, protected by the Constitution. Local government authority in Trinidad and Tobago has no constitutional protection, unlike in Guyana and unlike in Jamaica. So all that has happened, my friends, is that the Minister of Finance is now the boss of local government in Trinidad and Tobago. It has been shifted from the Ministry of Rural Development to the Ministry of Finance. Games and tricks galore from the PNM. The third pillar, new responsibilities. You're now going to have an executive council and a municipal council, but no additional funding. At present, the regional corporations have little or no funding to repair simple potholes, landslips, or clear drains. You heard the Prime Minister himself saying that there was a drain around his residence somewhere in Diego Martin, and the Diego Martin Regional Corporation didn't have the funds to come and clear the drain. Now, they're giving you additional responsibilities because you're responsible for school repairs, social services, and sporting programs, but no additional funding. So those practitioners, local government councillors, mayors, aldermen, chairmen who are going in there for this new term, trust me, if this local government reform bill is put into effect by the PNM, you have to spin straw into gold to get funds to do your necessary repairs. And then they come and they tell you about local contractors. Well, you know, that sounds nice in a local setting. The Point Forte, Arima, local contractors, you can only employ local contractors. Again, a myth, an evil myth being perpetrated by the PNM, because contractors first have to register with the regional body before they even consider for contracts. That is what the procurement laws say. And this registration applies to contractors across the board. You can come from Point Forte, you can come from Mayaro, you can come from Arima, you can come from Dabadi, you can come from Toko, you can come from Sangre Grande. If you register to get work and you qualify for the work, you have to get the work no matter where you come from. And then they speak about the fifth pillar, more effective municipal policing. Now, since 2019, the government promised that each corporation will get an additional 100 municipal police officers in their system. But no new building for them, no new space for them, no new equipment for them. So how do you expect them to assist with municipal policing when you don't give them the material to do their jobs? And remember, my friends, that security is a main issue in this country today, because the PNM government has failed us in securing our homes, our families, and our relatives and friends. Then the sixth pillar, they speak about development control. Well, only the government seems to know what that means. What is development control? The seventh pillar, they speak about infrastructural works. Now, that would have made sense if the secondary roads company was kept under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Rural Government. I believe it was formed. They gave them $300 million to do A, B, Z, C, and D. So that would have solved it. But the government, typical three-card smart man, they moved that secondary roads committee and put it under the Minister of Works. For whatever reason, no one knows. So that no resources to do infrastructural works. Zilch. The eighth pillar, disaster management. Now, on this occasion, I want to congratulate the Hunters Association, I believe.
And the search and rescue team.
The search and rescue team that spent, I see here on the newspaper, 12 hours. The girl, age 5, she was being swept away in a swollen river, and they went and they did their business without any government input, mind you, and they rescued this girl. Now, this is what, in a civilized world, the manner in which a disaster management unit is supposed to operate. But in Trinidad and Tobago, whenever there's a flood or high winds and disasters befall constituents or burgesses or citizens, sometimes the local government practitioner doesn't have what we in the country call a tall boots to go and help out, to go and relieve some person from their distress. If they don't dip into their pockets, in their personal resources, or get the help of good Samaritans like the Hunters Association, the Hunters Rescue body, they are left on their own. And then, so that when you're speaking about disaster management, tell us what you mean. How are you going to equip them? And remember, local government practitioners are the first responders. And if you are the first responders, how in heaven's name are you going to do your job? Then we have the involvement of civil society. Now, we spoke just now there about the dividing up of the regional corporation now, executive council, municipal council. So there will be a shift of staff from one place to another. Have you, Mr. Government, Mr. Prime Minister, had dialogue with the unions involved? The PSA, NUGFW, and all the other unions that represent workers at the Port of Spain City Corporation, the Diego Martin, what the Borough Corporation now, I think they call them. Yes, the Siparia Borough. Have you had dialogue with them on what this shifting around of staff, what impact it will have on their terms and conditions? Have you had dialogue with the Statutory Authorities Service Commission, the Public Service Commission? What are you doing since July 2022? This act has been assented to by Her Excellency the President. Tell us what you're doing. And you're all over the place. On every platform you can go, You're telling the population,
Vote for reform.
vote for local government reform. And you had almost 11 months since July 2022 to do something about it. But all you thinking about is the election. So you proclaim Section 11A4 to postpone the election in the hope that you will get some time. But even though that time that you robbed us of, that you illegally added on to the terms of the outgoing councillors and aldermen, you did utilize it properly. So there's going to be an administrative shake-up at the regional corporations. Do workers now know where they are going? What their duties are, their functions, their new terms and conditions? I want to warn those regional bodies, those CEOs of those regional bodies, that if this government implements this local government reform in this unpalatable state that it is in now, right now, that there is going to be chaos and disaster at those regional corporations. The 10th pillar is that the government speaks of is regional development plans. Now let me inform the government that since 2014, by the partially proclaimed Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, the regional corporations have that responsibility. But for the last 8 years, fooling around all over the place, talking a lot of nonsense all over the place, the government has done nothing to bring into effect this act. So brothers and sisters, when the PNM comes and tells us in this campaign that when you vote for them, you're voting for local government reform, chase them away. Tell them that is baloney, nonsense, foolishness. Local government reform is already the law. What they must explain to you is why, since July 1, 2022, almost 11 months away, they have failed to have the law proclaimed and put into operation. If you want effective local government reform, brothers and sisters, I ask you, come August the 14th, vote for the United National Congress, which will certainly form the government in 2025, and then we can effect good local government reform. Thank you and have a good morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tony, for that very detailed explanation, and I would say with surgical precision, you have dismantled the PNM's argument about their 10 pillars of reform, and you have shown how vacuous this argument is. Ladies and gentlemen, we are, as we get into this local government season, and it's called a silly season, but I think that the PNM are taking it a little too serious in how silly they are, because they have continuously campaigned on this issue of local government reform, and we have taken our time to explain to you today that the local government reform has already been passed, and it is the implementation deficit of the PNM, and it is the geographical discrimination whereby they deprive certain corporations of resources. Those are the reasons why you continue to suffer at the level of local government. Those are the reasons why that local government practitioners do not have the resources to treat with the issues affecting their community. And voting for them on August the 14th is not going to bring you the resources that you need. It is not going to bring you any sort of relief from flooding, from potholes, from drains that need to be cleaned. It is not going to change anything, because you have an incompetent government trying to sell you on a story of reform because they have nothing else to campaign on at this point in time. As we are on the topic of the election and voting, I want to spend a little bit of time to address a matter which reported in the media that one of our UNC candidates was actually being forced to withdraw his candidacy in the local government election. And of course, I am speaking about our candidate, Mr. Lyndon DeGans. Now, Mr. DeGans is seeking to exercise his constitutional right to freedom of expression, we have a very specific constitutional right of freedom to join political parties and express political views, and your freedom of thought and expression is also enshrined in the Constitution. And part of that, of course, is being able to express political views and your political thoughts and so on. And Mr. Digans is an employee of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. He is employed as a chauffeur. Chauffeur 2, I believe, is the title that he is that he holds currently. He has been an employee of the bank for decades, I think close to 29 years, if I recall correctly from this matter that we've been dealing with. And they are trying to say that he cannot participate in local government elections because of an internal policy that the central bank has, which, and I will read for you what the policy says. It says that the bank encourages our employees to exercise their civic rights. However, as the bank must operate as objective, impartial, and a balanced manner, and be seen to be politically independent, our employees shall not run for nor hold a political, local government, borough council, or parliamentary office. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you have internal policies of a state agency or any other organization which attempts to curtail the constitutional rights and freedoms of an individual, which are enshrined in the highest law of our land, that is our Constitution, they must be proportional. And to say in this case, and we are arguing that in this case, this policy ought not to be applicable to someone who holds the position of a chauffeur in the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. We find it to be highly disproportional. We have reviewed the jurisprudence in coming out of the European Court of Human Rights. We have looked at the Canadian jurisprudence, where in many cases they have actually said that, you know, what applies to, I think in one of the Canadian cases, they said what applies to, for example, a deputy minister cannot be the same rule that will apply to a cafeteria worker. That's the example that they use. And so we are saying in this case that there is a high degree of disproportionality. But I want to just illustrate what I consider to be the hypocrisy of this policy. There's absolutely no prohibition. In fact, the policy was amended in the central bank to permit employees to hold positions on state boards. Somehow, the PNM tries to sanitize this thing about state board appointments as though it is some sort of national service or some sort of employment that you have to be qualified for. That is not what it is. When you are appointed by a state board, that is a political appointment. So somehow, the policy whereby the central bank believes that they must be seen to be non-political does not prevent employees of the central bank from accepting a political appointment on a state board. But the chauffeur cannot represent the people in his community. That is absolute hypocrisy. It is wrong. We believe that it is far too disproportionate incursion on the constitutional rights and freedom of the individual, and so we have taken this matter, and that is why we have chosen to take the matter to court, and we were also successful in obtaining an injunction to prevent the court from, dismissing Mr. Digans while the substantive matter is being heard, and from forcing him to withdraw his candidacy. I want to, highlight for you at this point in time that nomination day has gone, and if the central bank were to be able to force Mr. Digans to withdraw his candidacy, that seat will be an automatic win for the PNM. And that is why we found it very necessary to go to the court. I hear the PNM machinery out there, the UNC, we love court. In fact, this week in the Senate, I heard one of the PNM senators say the UNC just love a courthouse, we love a courthouse. And yes, we do actually. We love being able to stand in defense of the rights and freedoms of all the individuals who make up this Republican nation that we are a part of. The UNC tries to secure rights, while the PNM tries at every turn to take away your rights. And that is something that I think everyone can agree with when you look at the history of the UNC and the type of litigation that we engage in. So this is no different, and we will not back down in terms of trying to have this policy reviewed by the court. That is what the court is there for. I don't know if the PNM don't seem to understand that, but that's the purpose why you have separation of powers. We'll get to that in a little bit and talk a little bit more about separation of powers, but that's why you need to have an independent judiciary. That is why it is so important for us to have a separate arm of the state that can act as a check and a balance on the executive and their agencies. And although the central bank is an independent agency, there is a certain amount of crossover, because of course the appointments made from the top of the central bank and so on by the governor and all of that, there is a political flavor. We don't have to look very far to find the political influence in the central bank with the dismissal of Jawala Rambaran. When Jawala Rambaran disagreed with the Minister of Finance, they triggered the process to have the president fire the man. I think it was Christmas Eve or Old Year's Day or something like that, in the dead of the night. So there is already political influence in the central bank, but you are saying a chauffeur cannot act as a representative for the people within his community. Local government is, as Mr. Tony would have said to you this morning, the first line of defense. You are literally on the ground. And it is something, it is an admirable undertaking for anyone to want to be a representative at the core community level of local government, and to deprive someone of that right on the basis that it would affect somehow the impartiality or the perception of impartiality at the central bank. I could perhaps understand if you're a manager, if you are responsible for, reviewing monetary policy and making policies and so on and so forth, because those things, you do not want political influence in those types of decisions. You want to exclude political influence or the perception of political influence when it comes to dealing with things like the amount of currency that would be in the system and so on. But you cannot have a broad brush, just one massive sweep of policy, especially when you're dealing with fundamental rights and freedoms. So I think the time has come where we must review that policy, and we intend to force a review of that policy through the court, since that is what it has come to in this particular case. I want to also say that unlike the public service regulations, which has an absolute prohibition on engaging in political activity, the public service regulations as well, there's a very broad sweep. But you understand, when you're working in public service, they say, look, you cannot go politicking, you cannot go canvassing and so on. The central bank policy, which prevents you from running for political office, does not prohibit campaigning. It doesn't prohibit, you could wear your balize proud on your chest as an employee of the central bank, and be in every political meeting. You could hug up the candidate and take out a picture with the candidate, but you can't be the candidate. So that is how nonsensical this particular policy is, and that is why we feel the need to challenge it in particular. But I do believe that there needs to be a comprehensive review of all policies that infringe upon the rights of persons to engage in political activity and freedom of expression and so on, because those core fundamental rights and freedoms ought not to be tampered with willy-nilly and in a broad brush manner. You must only have an incursion on a constitutional right as much as it is absolutely necessary. And the PNM government, we joke about it, but it's a serious thing. They are very familiar with the case of Surat, the standard law that deals with proportionality of any particular law or rule or regulation and so on. And I think that same standard has to be applied to internal policies of the central bank and other state organizations. So we intend to fight alongside Mr. Digans. We intend to, as we have always done, fight for the constitutional rights and freedoms of individuals, and to ensure that there's no unnecessary incursion as much as possible. And we also want to make sure that we will not hand over any seat at this point in time to the PNM by default. And so we intend to keep up the fight on that central bank matter. The other matter that I see grabbing some headlines would be this story of the fake missing file. And I saw yesterday that some recommendations were made about, digitalizing files and so on at the Office of the Attorney General. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, this is what I would just classify as just one more in a long line of PNM shams. Because, firstly, the media is reporting bits and pieces of this report from retired Justice Stanley John, but the report is not being disclosed, and the Attorney General has refused to disclose the report. This was a case when there was a backlash from the public on the amount of monies being paid because of a default and the failure of the Office of the Attorney General to properly defend the matter or to defend it at all. And in the face of that backlash, some story was made up about a file going missing and then reappearing. And that was just a distraction. This is a typical PNM distraction. But you know what is different about this particular PNM distraction is that it has cost the taxpayers of this country over $800,000. $800,000, I think that is the preliminary figure, if I recall the answer given in the parliament, the preliminary figure of $800,000 into the pockets of persons chosen and selected by the PNM just to cover up their incompetence in running their ministry. Just to cover up was it plain outright incompetence. And it is a blatant lie to say, how does an electronic file go missing? That is a lie. Since the advent of COVID, the judiciary has only been receiving documents in electronic form. Everything was filed electronically. You would have read in the media that everything had been emailed to the court and to the other side and to the office of the Attorney General. If something is misplaced, can't you find it in your email if the physical document goes missing? And even if you find that you have misplaced a particular document from your file, it is common practice. All lawyers do it. You write to the registrar, you go to office copies, you apply for a copy and you get one. There's no science, there's no high science behind it. This is a common practice that any attorney can explain to you. So they came now to distract from their incompetence with a story about a missing file. And I say today, the missing file that was never missing. You know what has cost the taxpayers of this country so much of money, and all in an attempt to do damage control and to take heat off of the government from their incompetence. It is what we call the bait and switch. They will bait you with this story, this whole thing. It was such a mystery. It was, the Attorney General grabbed every headline at the time. Oh my God, some real plot to steal this file out of the office of the Attorney General. And then lo and behold, there is the file. It was disclosed that the persons appeared in the matter, participated in the matter. Someone at a very high level at the time, an Assistant Solicitor General who now holds the office of a judge in the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago, appeared and participated in the matter and made recommendations in the matter. And when all of that happened and hit the media, they said, okay, we're going to have an investigation. And I read today that some attorneys and so on are saying, yes, it's time to restructure the department and we have to have electronic and so on. Where have you all been existing for the last 2 years? Everything is electronic. Everything is electronic. And, if it is that they are serious about treating with the issues and being accountable to the population about what they have discovered out of this entire scenario, they must disclose that Stanley John report to the public. We, the taxpayers of the country, paid for that report. Armour did not pay for that report. The Prime Minister did not pay for that report. We, you and I, are paying for that report, and therefore we deserve to see it. And I find it quite curious that some story about a missing file. I asked a question in the Parliament about the number of cases in which the government had to pay damages for failure to file defenses and so on. And the Attorney General said, well, from gathering, from what we were able to gather, because of course people have left and so on, this is what we were saying. He talked about some 9 matters. And he talked about a figure. I immediately produced 2 court orders and the names of cases to members of the media that were almost more than half of the figure that he quoted. And I asked for a period of over 5 years, and those 2 matters took place in 1 year. There's obviously a complete lack of management of the office of the Attorney General. They don't know what cases they have, what cases they are defending, whether they have entered appearances, how much money they are losing by losing cases, how much money they are losing by failing to defend cases. I don't understand. It appears that checks are just being signed and money is being paid out and nobody is keeping track of what is happening in that office. So if you want to restructure, what needs restructuring, I think, is from the top. It is at the level of the Attorney General, because he has clearly demonstrated a failure. And I think his predecessor was even worse in terms of managing the litigation portfolio of the state. The Attorney General is the state's lawyer. You act for the citizens of the country when you appear in civil matters as the Attorney General. That is why under the State Liability and Proceedings Act, any lawsuit, any claim against any arm of the state, you bring it against in the name of the Attorney General. You sue the Attorney General. So if you are a contractor and you are owed money and you want to sue for it, you are suing the state. You sue the Attorney General unless you're dealing with one of the special purpose companies. If a ministry engages you to do work and they don't pay you, you sue the Attorney General. If if you slip and you fall on a sidewalk or pavement and you are injured, if you are a police officer and the ceiling fall on you while you are in the workplace, you sue the Attorney General for damages. He has to represent the state and defend the state in all of these matters. And if he cannot manage that, well then give up the job and give it to somebody who can. But don't come here to hoodwink the population with made up stories and try to dramatize it with stories of a missing file that suddenly became, was found once again. How come no other Attorney General had a complaint about a missing file? But part of this bait and switch that they try to do is that they try to tell you that they are taking action and they have launched an investigation, and then suddenly it becomes a secret because you see the heat cools off from them, the media stops paying attention to it. The same exact thing they did the other day with the Nikon investigation. The whole of South Trinidad was rocked by an explosion, and today we do not know what came out of that investigation, but they jump up hot and sweaty. We are investigating. Suddenly now Nikon is a private company and they can't investigate. Why is the government then investigating in a private company? And we have to continuously ask these questions on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago because it affects us. It affects us. It affects the residents of Marabella who would have heard that explosion, who were living in fear. An employee of a company recently died, again, at Nikon due to an accident. And we want to know what is going to happen. Is the government not concerned about the safety and security of citizens and feel that they have an obligation to make findings of reports public? Can you simply continue to spend our money, the taxpayers' money, $800,000 to start with, for secret reports? For a file that was never missing? I will tell you what is missing in this country and what we need an investigation into. What is missing in this country is integrity at the level of the government. What is missing is accountability. What is missing is transparency. And we need an investigation to find the integrity within the PNM government, because that is what they are missing. If they had any integrity whatsoever, they would come clean with the population and say, we have spent your $800,000 and these are our findings, and they will make that report public. But instead, they went on a campaign to try to, again, scandalize the persons who sued the state, who went before the court as they are entitled to do. They went before the court because, of course, they were clients of Mr. Ram Logan, so that, of course, fuels the fire for the PNM to want to attack them. They went before the court as they are entitled to, with the representation of their choice as they are entitled to, and sued the state for being held in custody on a matter which they said was malicious prosecution. And rather than armor, have the integrity to come forward and say, well, this is the reason why this award of damages was made. This is the reason why a defense wasn't filed. He chooses to scandalize the entire thing and to try to distract the population from the real issue, which is his failure to manage his ministry. Now, as we're on the topic of court, I also noted that we have a number of matters, and I think a Newsday editorial, and I will steal their caption from the editorial, I believe it was yesterday, calling Judicial musical chairs. We have also come under criticism for example, as you would know, Mr. Ram Logan and myself are representing the Public Service Association and one of their employees by the name of Ms. Dore, who has gone to the court to challenge the implementation and the rollout of the Trans-Tobago Revenue Authority. A highly political case, because of course the Revenue Authority is one of the things that the PNM campaigned on before. It is a move by them which we oppose, and so on for various reasons. We do not agree that that level of political control should be exercised over what is now Customs and Excise Division and the Board of Inland Revenue. We do not believe that we should remove that insulation that public officers have through the service commissions when you are dealing with such important functions. And so there's a matter before the court. And we've been criticized for filing an application for a judge to recuse herself from the matter. The judge initially refused to do so when, again, following the protocol and the accepted procedure, a letter was written identifying all of the reasons why we believe that that it shouldn't be done and why the judge should recuse herself, because the client, and at the end of the day, again, the PNM and their operatives will try to scandalize the opposition. But as attorneys, we represent the interests of our clients. And if the client feels that there may be an unconscious or perceived bias on the part of a judge because of the political connection of her spouse, then we have a duty to raise those matters before the court. The judge initially said that marriage hasn't affected her ability to be unbiased and to be fair and to exercise her it hasn't dimmed her ability, I think is the phrase that she used, yes, to exercise a high degree of agency. I have no doubt that the judge is quite capable perhaps of exercising a high degree of agency. But at the end of the day, it is the perception, correct, and we all know, I think it has been said time and time again, justice must not only be done but must be seen to be done. And if a client approaching the court feels that there may be some unconscious bias in the mind of the judicial officer, the right thing to do is to recuse oneself from the case. And I want to congratulate this morning Madam Justice Lambert Peterson for making the right decision in this matter. I believe that she has done the right thing by recusing herself, because you cannot for a second say, and I think that what has been put out there as justification and defense, saying that we were wrong to ask for that recusal on behalf of our clients, the Public Service Association and Ms. Dure, that, persons playing golf together, but they're not golfing partners, you just play together. A person's holding, I think, positions on two state boards, two very powerful state boards. A person holding, I think, was awarded a bunkering license through a company which we're associated with. Buying apartments in a development linked to another name that is now being called in the political arena. You cannot say that a client, that whether it is a trade union or individual or anybody else, any litigant before the court, is wrong to say that all of that adds up to the perception that a person may have an unconscious bias. And I believe that it is high time, and I agree with what was said by the newsy, that it may be that now that, you see, I understand that the judiciary wants to operate in a very cloistered way, and we've said that it's important that they operate in a way that they don't answer to anyone and they are not accountable to anyone, and they don't necessarily have to disclose things to the general public, because they operate at this high level and they sit above the political fray and so on. But what we are seeing is that all of these little connections to judges, are coming out, that really and truly brings the judiciary into, under scrutiny, and it is unwise, and it is harmful to the administration of justice to have the public now discover, because an application is made or because a comment is made on a political platform, that there are these connections between judges and so on. And so in that newsday editorial, it questioned whether or not it was time for us to ask for more disclosure coming out of the judiciary, rather than trying to defend and say, well, my spousal connections have nothing to do with my ability to adjudicate over a particular matter and so on. I don't think it's necessary to get defensive when it comes to these things. I think it is necessary to uphold confidence in the judiciary. And it may very well be that, whilst we don't particularly enforce any sort of rules for reporting and disclosure by judicial officers, maybe we have to take a closer look at it. We hold the position of senators, even the independent senators who are appointed by the president and so on. If you go to the bank, or if our spouse or our brother or sister or anybody else goes to the bank to do a transaction that's over a certain amount, you have to make extensive disclosure.
Correct.
We have to file, and I would tell you, it is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, to sit down and collect information to file with the Integrity Commission. Judges don't have to do that. They have no requirement to disclose, personal connections, business deals, income and so on to the Integrity Commission, their assets, their liabilities. They don't have to disclose those things. We have to disclose all of those things for, I think, ourselves, spouses, and any child under the age of 18. And, why is it that there's that level of scrutiny for other persons who hold public office? And perhaps the time has come where we have to revisit whether or not it is necessary for judges to at least disclose when there is a political connection within their family. So whether it be a state board appointment, whether it be that their spouse is receiving the benefit of very lucrative state briefs, that's another one that I missed in this particular matter. And that was something that was of very grave concern to the PSA. That, again, because the UNC asked questions in the public interest, it is now known the amount of state briefs received by the spouse of the particular judge. So I say that the judge has done the right thing with all of the information put before her. Even though there was an initial reluctance, I would say that having heard submissions from both sides, the judge has adopted the correct approach and has now recused herself from that matter. And I think that that is the way that we have to go. And I would encourage other holders of public office, when their spouses hold political appointments on state boards and different agencies and so on, to exercise that same degree of integrity and recuse themselves, whether it is in the parliament, whether it is in the judiciary, or wherever it may be. When a matter is raised that directly impacts upon a function, a political function, that your spouse or your brother or your child or anybody else may be exercising, it will redound to the benefit of our democracy if you recuse yourself and you do not adjudicate over such matters, because you want the public to have confidence in all arms of the state. And therefore, I will encourage others to follow suit of Madam Justice Lambert Peterson. Finally, another matter involving the opposition is this matter of the EMBD. And again, while some people may find it vulgar for the opposition to raise issues on a political platform, I find it passing strange that no one found it vulgar that the Prime Minister of this country, utilizing the office of the Prime Minister and the diplomatic center, and speaking as the Prime Minister of the country, would launch a political attack from the office of the Prime Minister and from that platform against someone in the opposition about a matter and totally mislead the country.
Correct.
Totally mislead the country.
Two judges said it was inaccurate
About what was taking place at the Court of Appeal. And not one person from the court administration side, not one attorney from the EMBDC found it necessary to correct the record. Everybody sat, folded their arms, and was happy to allow Dr. Rowley, Prime Minister of this country, to launch a scathing political attack against Dr. Munilal and mislead the country and misquote what was happening about a case.
Correct.
And to give the impression to the country that he knew the outcome of a matter that was still being deliberated upon. And so I stand here today to tell you that we make no apologies. We make absolutely no apology for raising this matter in the public domain, because somebody has to hold the Prime Minister to account. And if nobody else, if the judiciary is willing to sit down and listen to a Prime Minister mislead the entire country about a court matter that is being considered by them and not correct the record, he actually said that the court made an order for the filing of defenses and found that there was a case to answer. That the Court of Appeal, he did not say that the High Court judge made that determination and then the matter was on appeal. He said the Court of Appeal made this decision. And that is wholly inaccurate. And at least 2 of the 3 judges, I believe in their statement, said that it was inaccurate.
Correct.
But they find it vulgar for Dr. Munilal to now raise the matter on a political platform and to bring a peripheral matter. And I will address that very shortly again. Because you see, everybody can insult the opposition. Everybody could mislead the population about the role of the opposition and what we do. But when we defend ourselves, we are the devil. Suddenly we become the bad ones. And that was exactly what Anthony Vieira did. And Dr. Munilal drew a comparison between what was happening right now and what Dr. Rowley was saying when he was addressing the country as the Prime Minister, but using the opportunity to launch a political attack on him. He drew a comparison and he asked a rhetorical question about the statements made by Anthony Vieira in the Senate about WhatsApping judges and condemning me, interestingly enough. Me, who I appear in a number, all of those matters that I spoke about this morning, EMBD, TTRA, central bank matter involving our candidates, the local government matter to force them to call the election because they try to illegally defer it. I appear in the Court of Appeal in a number of matters as junior counsel to the best senior counsel in this country, Mr. Anand Ram Logan. And Anthony Vera stood up in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and said that he was having WhatsApp conversations with judges in the Court of Appeal about me and my behavior because I answered him when he as well went to the media and misled the population. And I will go back into this because I think it is important. When there was interference in the appointment of the Commissioner of Police, something that we are still paying for today, a decision that we are still paying for today, and we, the opposition, in defense of our constitution and in defense of our democracy, try to get an investigation through the appropriate parliamentary channels launched. The person at the center of that debacle, Ms. Bliss Prasad, has a sister who is an independent senator, and Ms. Prasad's sister did not find it necessary to recuse herself from voting in the parliament, and we objected strongly to that. We objected strongly and loudly and vociferously to that, as we should, as should every right-thinking member of society. And what happened? Anthony Vera went to the media and said, well, if independent Senator C. Prasad is conflicted, so is Ms. Lakshmi Dayal. And here the comparison, and here the example that he used. I was involved in the matter where the legal notice that dealt with the appointment of an acting commissioner was questioned and parts of it was struck off because it was held to be in violation of the Constitution, and the PNM actually did not follow the constitutional procedure and bring the acting appointment of Gary Griffith to the Parliament. And he drew a comparison between me being involved in that case and Rowley thieving, the Prime Minister stealing, absconding, or sending somebody to abscond and interfering with this report that ought to have been laid in the Parliament, and said that I was equally conflicted. And when I lashed back at him for that inaccurate, misleading attack on me and my integrity, because that's what he did. He attacked my integrity when we said that Shirisi Prasad, independent senator, should have stepped aside. He attacked my integrity and said that I should have also stepped aside because I was involved in a case involving the appointment of a commissioner of police, as though it is the same thing. My brother or sister didn't go and interfere with any reports, and that was the issue at hand being determined there. If I had a family member working in the office of the president who knew that the report went missing or facilitated that report being pulled back or something like that, of course I would have recused myself, because we in the UNC have the integrity to do that. But Anthony Vera got up now and attacked me. When I lashed back at him, he got up in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago now and brought the entire administration of justice into disrepute by saying that judges from the Court of Appeal were conversing with him about the behavior of the opposition and singled me out in particular. So Dr. Munilal now asking the question, because after that the opposition wrote to the Chief Justice complaining about the statements of Senator Vera and asking the Chief Justice to investigate and to find out who were those judges, because it is a cause of grave concern when you have a PNM case brought through the EMBD against Dr. Munilal. You have the PNM government being brought to the court by the UNC on a number of things to uphold the rule of law when they try to put off elections and other things. And so it is of grave concern to us if judges have a particular political perception. And so he asked a rhetorical question on a platform, well, is it that the same judges who were WhatsApping Senator Vera are communicating with Dr. Rowley? Because he stood there as Prime Minister and made some very bold and brazen statements about the outcome of a matter in which a decision had not yet been delivered. And I read that Dr. Munilal in his own way said that, you know, they should thank him for raising the matter, because it has now been disclosed that at the time that the decision was taken by EMBD to bring this civil claim, I don't know if people are aware, well, you know what is a civil claim? A civil claim means that there's no police investigation or nothing like that. I could go down the road now and file a civil claim against Mr. Tony. Anybody could bring a civil claim. Whether you could sustain it or not is another question, right? But EMBDC, the board of EMBDC, I presume, would have had to give an authority, and I think that they should disclose that, decided to bring a civil claim against some contractors, some former employees, and Dr. Munilal. And at the time that decision was taken, the judge's brother was sitting on the board. And that is what we have now discovered. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the PNM could fool you with talk about the UNC this and the UNC that and the UNC wants to scandalize it. We are not scandalizing anybody. It is the administration of justice that is being scandalized. What would have happened had this matter not been raised and a decision was handed down by the Court of Appeal, only for it to be discovered at some later point in time down the road that the brother of one of the judges on that panel actually took the decision to bring that claim against Dr. Munilal and others? What would have happened? That would have brought the administration of justice into dispute. That would have been vulgar. Asking questions about how a prime minister could make statements about a matter with confidence about the outcome of a matter is not vulgar. What is vulgar is a prime minister using his office to mislead the population and nobody answering. Nobody answering him. A responsible judiciary and the persons responsible for the administration in the judiciary should have put out a statement immediately correcting the record about that matter, so that no one involved in the matter. That matter doesn't just involve the UNC, it involves a number of contractors and so on. In fact, the appeal was brought by the contractors, not Dr. Munilal. It is the contractors who are saying, look, this claim is defective, it lacks particulars and so on and so forth. And they lost at the High Court on those grounds, and they have now appealed it to the Court of Appeal, and they are the ones awaiting a decision. And they, as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, who have sued the MBDC for their monies and who are now being accused of all kind of cartel and all kinds of things, are listening to the Prime Minister of this country that they belong to make statements about the outcome of a matter in which they are affected. And the judiciary didn't find it necessary to correct the record. And that is the part of this that I find to be scandalous. That is what scandalizes the administration of justice, not the UNC asking questions, because that is our job. It is our job to ask questions and to correct the record when it is necessary, when no one else seems to want to do it. And this issue, I'm sorry to say, but there are no sacred cows when it comes to the administration of justice in Trinidad and Tobago. There are no sacred cows when it comes to transparency and accountability. If it is that judges want to be free to engage in discourse with their colleagues about the conduct of the opposition and so on, okay, that's your right, that's your freedom, but recuse yourself. As I say, take a page out of the book of Madam Justice Lambert Peterson, who has now recused herself. If you are politically aligned, if your family members are politically aligned, recuse yourself from politically sensitive matters. That will uphold confidence in the judiciary, not trying to shut up the UNC. Trying to silence the UNC and insult us and paint us in a bad light for defending ourselves and for asking questions will not uphold confidence in the administration of justice. What we need is more transparency and accountability at all levels and throughout all arms of the state, the parliament, the executive, and the judiciary, to ensure that we do not have a recurrence of these types of matters. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we end off this morning, I want to say the time has come for change in this country. We want a secure future. We want secure streets, schools, communities. What we do not want, and I say we, because I see other people who have absolutely nothing to campaign on. And I want to put a question today to the Prime Minister. I want to ask him, because I have respect for the office of Prime Minister. I would like him to clarify some statements that he made on a political platform. Because having absolutely no success to campaign on local government reform, they have resorted to making very disgusting, divisive statements on political platform about they're giving we to come for them and this kind of thing. I want to tell you something. You see, this is we. This is Sandy Grande and San Fernando. This is African and Indian. There's only one we, and it is the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to call upon every member of parliament, regardless of what bench you sit on, to reject those types of statements that are being made are trying to divide this country at a time like this. Every time we enter an election season, there is an attempt to divide this country along racial lines and along other lines, and we will not fall for it. It must stop. We are all suffering from the incompetence of the PNM, and we together must stand up and take a stand against the PNM. As I said, out of respect, I would like the Prime Minister to clarify his statements. I want to give him the opportunity to clarify the statements he made about stand your ground and how and what the stand your ground means. Citizens of this country are living in fear. We are going to bed every night not knowing if you will open your eyes and find an intruder in your home. I want to know, as a citizen of this country, that the law of the land will protect me if I have to defend my home and my child. I want you, every citizen of this country, to know that the law of the land will protect you if you have to take matters into your own hands and protect your life and your property and the lives of your loved ones. And I do not believe that a responsible government and a responsible Prime Minister should use that as a way to create divisiveness in our society at this point in time. Reject those notions and disabuse your minds of those things that are being planted by an incompetent PNM government that have absolutely no accomplishment to campaign on at this point in time. Come out and exercise your right and your duty to vote in local government elections. Vote for good representation. Vote for real, meaningful local government reform that would alleviate the real issues affecting people, like flooding, like security, like the state and of our roads. And do not fall for distractions. You are going to see many of them coming in the days ahead with this campaign. Do not fall for the PNM distractions that would present themselves in the days and weeks to come, ladies and gentlemen. So unless there are any other questions from the media, that's it for this morning.
We have some questions, Senator. First of all, to Mr. Sweeney, you say that the government can implement its reform agenda without the support of the opposition. So
no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. That was an editorial that I got from the Guardian or something. I'll get it to you. Hold on a second. That was an editorial piece that was criticizing. An editorial that was criticizing the opposition. It says here, the ruling, this is an editorial of Wednesday, June 28, 2023, page 12 of the Express. The ruling People's National Movement has been campaigning on local government reform, but it is very well aware that changes to the law do not rise to the level of meaningful reform due to the lack of support for its plan by the opposition United National Congress. Now, what this tells me is that, you see, the Express is behaving as though local government reform is yet to become law. And that the opposition, as I said, typical blame Kamala, blame the UNC thing, the activities of the opposition is preventing local government reform. Local government reform is already law. Act number 11 of 2022. We are telling to the government, get off your armchair, get off the golf course, get off your boat, get off of your cozy little world that you live in now, and implement the law. The opposition has nothing to do with the implementation of the law. And this is what Mr. Clyde Weatherhead was also saying in his little comment that he made. That he said, no councillor or alderman elected on August the 14th, no corporation to which they are elected, has any power to instruct the president to proclaim any law. Let the Prime Minister go up to President's house around the Savannah there, make an appointment with Her Excellency and say, listen, we want to implement, we want you to proclaim not only Section 11A and Section 12.
To run from election.
Yes, to run from the election, but implement all the sections that are speaking about reforms to the local government regional corporations. I will also add that if they do implement it, given their non-existence, their laziness to put the infrastructure in place to do the implementation, that there will be chaos and disaster in some of these regional corporations. That's what I'm saying.
But why do you then think the government is not proceeding to implement this law?
Well, you have to ask the government that. I think it is their usual laziness, their usual incompetence. Why they are not implementing the law, God alone knows. But it is the law. They implemented Section 11A to postpone the election and to have a 4-year term for incoming councillors. They did implement that section. Why have they not implemented the rest?
I think it's worth noting that when the press conference was held, speaking about the implementation of Section 11 and 12 and the postponement of the election, they set out a timetable. They actually set out a timetable and said, look, we have a 3 months for this and 6 months for that and so on and so forth. And that was in November. Not one single thing has been done. So they can't even stick to their own timetable. And I would agree with this. It is plain and simple incompetence. I told you it was I believe it was an Express editorial that coined that term, implementation deficit.
Correct.
And implementation deficit plagues this government. It took them 8 years for procurement.
Yes. And then remember, this thing has been assented to since the 1st of July 2022. If the government tomorrow morning can come and tell the population, well, in July 2022 we did this, August 2022 we did that, September 2022 we did this, October 2022 we did that, November 2022, besides postponing the elections, we did this. Even when they got the postponement and they cheated all of us of the right to vote, they had 6 more months. What did you do in December 2022? What did you do in January of 2023, February of 2023, March of 2023, April, May, June, even today? What are you doing? But you have this law in the books, and you up and down the country talking about local government reform. And if you vote PNM, you'll get local government reform. Mr. Clyde had said that is a lie. Telling voters that voting in local government elections 2023 is voting for local government reform is a lie. A most monstrous lie on the part of the PNM. Typical trying to hoodwink the population into believing that there is something about this thing. But it is the law. Implement the law, please. That's all I ask.
Senator Luchmedial, regarding the situation involving Mr. Degans, the central bank might counter by saying that Mr. Degans knowingly signed a contract prohibiting him from running for political office. How would you respond to that?
Well, that would be one argument, that they would say that he, he's held the job for 29 years and so on, and this is their policy. That doesn't, it doesn't mean that the policy is right. It doesn't mean that the policy isn't, infringing on his constitutional rights. This is a claim dealing with constitutional rights, and so we will, address it in that way. If tomorrow the central bank were to come up with a policy that says you can't grow your hair, and they say, well, you signed a contract and you knew that you would be bound by the policies of the government, of the bank, sorry, is that going to be all right? I would remind you, there was a case like this involving the wearing of a hijab by a police officer, and that same argument was raised because we went on the right of freedom of to express your religious views and expression and so on as well, and practice your religion. And that same argument was brought out by the government, by the Attorney General, saying that when you sign up to become a member of the police service, you are bound by the rules and regulations of uniform, and so you're aware that you have to wear uniform, and that the hijab is not a part of it. And the court did not rule in favor of the government in that case. They ruled in favor of our client, who was now permitted to wear her hijab as part of her uniform. You see, it didn't interfere with her duties. And that's the same point we're making here with this broad brush approach, right? Just because anybody could make policy, but they have to be reasonable, they have to be rational. And I'm saying again, particularly if you are interfering with constitutional rights and you are circumscribing those rights and curtailing those rights, it must be completely justifiable in a society that has respect for the rights and freedoms of the individual. Reasonably justifiable, that's the words used in the Constitution. So you cannot simply make policies and say, well, that was the policy when you came here to work, and the state cannot treat with citizens' rights in such a flippant manner. You have to really justify it. So to say that a chauffeur who doesn't determine monetary policy, who isn't in charge of determining how much currency is in circulation, who isn't acting as a banker for the government and all of that he is not allowed to hold up local government office. The bank would be required to do more than just say, well, that's a policy and you signed up for it. You have to show that you are justified. In my respectful view, they have to show that this a justifiable incursion upon his rights and freedoms.
Regarding the report into the missing file, is there any legal action that could be taken to force the government to make the report public?
One of the ways that we have utilized, one of the channels we have utilized is, of course, good UNC legislation in the form of freedom of information. And over time, that has been utilized in order to get disclosure of a number of reports, statements, and so on. That's how we know about the amount of legal fees being paid to particular attorneys like Mr. Peterson and so on. And I make no complaint against Mr. Peterson. Let me just make that very clear. I make no complaint about his competence and so on. I'm just saying the fact that he receives state briefs is something that is, of course, of concern. Likewise, in this matter, freedom of information may be one of the channels that could be explored. And it would be for the Attorney General, if he refuses to disclose the report, to say why. So what is in that report that is so top secret that the people who paid for it cannot see it? Right? He must come on to us here. But I would say that, again, a government that has any shred of integrity and who believes in accountability to the people. You see, it's the people of Trinidad who also have to pay that $20 million, It is the people of Trinidad who pay the $800,000 and who will also have to pay the $20 million to the men who were successful in the court. So if there was some failure within the ministry, if it is that some person dropped the ball, what action was taken? What disciplinary action will be taken against that person? We need to know. We need to know this, because people in Trinidad and Tobago, the citizens, cannot continuously watch money flowing out of the treasury if there is a problem with the management of litigation in the Office of the Attorney General. So we must get the satisfaction, and that's why you have an investigation, to satisfy us, the citizens, that matters are being addressed, and we must know what the problem is and what is being done about it. So I would say that without us having to go to roots of freedom of information and going to court and so on, the government, the Prime Minister, should instruct the Attorney General to make that report public immediately and have it laid in the Parliament.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And tune in this week. I'm sure we will have more press conferences. We will have our usual midweek press conference. And we will be in Cuba tomorrow night at the Cuba Multipurpose Hall, where we will again speak on issues surrounding local government and many other issues in the country right now. So thank you for joining us again. See you soon.